You know, there's no question the anti-development community has made stopping Keystone XL, you know, the top priority since the collapse of the cap and trade bill in Congress. Numerous groups have organized thousands of protesters, spent millions of dollars, and demonstrated against the project in Texas, Nebraska, here in Washington, as well as up in Canada. So the question I would ask is, do you think that the protests and activism that have centered on Keystone XL are the high watermark for anti-development activists, or is this the beginning of a new normal that we're going to see on infrastructure projects, both from the electricity sector as well as pipelines and other construction?
Well, I'll take that first just because it directly involves the Keystone pipeline. And the answer to that question is, I don't know. But they seem to have now, if I'm going to side with one side of that, it probably is the new norm, because we're seeing it on almost every energy project out there. Whether it's a solar facility in California or the transmission lines that have already been up, they seem to have a higher level of engagement now. And so we have to realize that they're going to protest, which requires us to even more rely on the science. Science will always trump emotion and misinformation. So we have to rely on the environmental studies, and they have to be solid. Ed, you have some
Actually,
Yeah, well, I agree with Lee. I genuinely believe that these protests are going to continue, and I have no objection to them. You know, the president of the Sierra Club has made the comment that they would not be satisfied until we reach a point where we do not need fossil fuels at all. And I think that could happen at some point in the future, because we know with technological advances that that's going to happen sometime in the future. But I was reading a little article recently that if you move too fast and you have unexpected consequences, as some of the things that I mentioned they're running into in Europe, if you have such a fundamental remodeling and it's not done slowly and carefully, our debt-based global economy, with the enormous fiscal imbalances, unfunded welfare promises, high unemployment, sluggish economies, and social inequities, can implode with little warning. So I have no objection to these protests, and I do think that they will be the norm, because we're going to have more and more people, less and less space. Resources are going to be limited, so I think that's going to continue to be an issue.
well, I think it is the new normal and will continue that way. I believe that governments, along with industry, have to start figuring out how they get ahead of this a little bit more, instead of reacting all the time to some of these accusations. I'm not against the fact that we need some of these organizations to actually keep our feet to the fire, to make sure that we do respect the environment, because I'm truly in favor of that. Coming from British Columbia, I introduced 2 energy plans while I was minister there, and went out quite a ways. In fact, British Columbia has in Canada the first carbon tax on fuels, all fossil fuels, I think in all of Canada. So we have worked towards that, but what I did find also is, even though we generate almost 95% of our electricity in British Columbia from clean sources, some of those organizations still oppose the building of clean sources, whether it's wind. In fact, our first wind farm was terrible. It took me years to get it off the ground. After everybody telling me, not everybody, but the organizations telling me we should be doing it, it was a real battle to get it done. So I think this is the new norm, and I think we have to figure out a way that we do a better job at it. One of them, I think, is, and this is long-term, but we need to actually get into the schools and start talking about how energy is used, how it's transported, why you need it. why it's involved, why when you go to the grocery store and you pick up a jug of milk, it's in plastic, and where did that come from? Now, all of those kind of things, I think we have to put a much higher emphasis on that to actually get the younger generation to think about this, because the younger generation is getting fed a lot of information that is misinformation. Some of it's correct, but some of it's misinformation, and they don't know. And I think it's our responsibility to start looking at that seriously.